let's start. I like to reward punctuality. And do you want to say a few words of introduction?
I'll say a few words.
Yeah.
I'm Beth Burks. I'm the executive director of HCOG, and we are very lucky to have Dan Buden here with us today. Big thanks to Una on our team who has been organizing the last couple days and a couple more. Dan is a walkability expert, complete street guru, and I will say even just this morning we heard multiple people locally here just talk about how much he has inspired their careers, not just some aspect of it, but maybe the whole reason they got into this line of work. So I think we're very grateful that you came and anxious to spend the next couple days with you as well.
Well, fantastic. And I think those of you who did take part in an event 10 years ago, or how many years ago it's been since I've been here, know that I'm in love with your community. It's about 3,800 communities I've now worked in over my career, and there may be 20 that are truly noteworthy, but you're in that list. And you keep getting better. Of course, the act of building or rebuilding any community is a long-term love. It's not something you do in 5 years or even 10 years, but you've made amazing progress. You really have. So I guess what I'd like to do is to hear who each of you are, then do a bit of a presentation, and then maybe a debrief after that. Is that okay? Is that a good game plan? Yeah, let's do that. And each of you would stand and introduce yourselves to the room. Yeah, this gentleman from Caltrans.
Okay, of course. Monday morning. I'm Brett Gornemeyer. I think you in the room here know who I am, maybe. I'm Vice President of Humboldt Bay Bicycle Commuters Association. I've been involved in that group for longer than I've been involved with Caltrans. I don't want to get into a long diatribe, but I moved up here shortly after 9/11 in 2001, and I was immediately attracted to the area, and really thought it'd be great if there was a bike path between Arcata and Eureka, and I joined the Humboldt Bay Bicycle Commuters Association, and then I ended up with Caltrans, and ended up in local assistance with Caltrans. I worked with some of our local agencies here closely, and helped out with with ADA assessments and of course biking and pedestrian issues. And I really a big advocate of bicycle and pet issues, but I'm also a car guy. I've got a sports car and I raced it and all that stuff. So it's kind of unique because most people are like, oh, I like bikes and I don't like cars, but I'm like, I'm a little bit of both. So
Good. You're into movement.
yeah. But I'm in traffic safety right now for Caltrans. So.
Great. Next.
Saskia Burnett. I work at Caltrans District 1. I'm the regional planner for regional planning liaison for Humboldt County. I've worked in planning and landscape architecture and urban design. Worked in Australia and here. I'm also one of the 2 district transit reps, and I work in the area of transportation planning.
Which city in Australia?
Melbourne, which has fantastic trains, light rail, bus,
Yeah.
a lot of bike, and a lot of ped.
Almost every year voted the most livable city in the world. Yeah.
Good morning, my name is Alexis Kelso, and I'm the Complete Streets Advisor for Caltrans Social Planning. Dana Smith with the Regional Transportation Planning Agency, HCOG. Have to be here, take a bus ride with me, or a bike ride, or a walk. But I'll have to drive in your car because I don't have one.
Would you go next, please?
Kristen Kenyon, Development Services Director for the City of Eureka. Hi, I'm Sarah Schaefer. I'm the mayor of Arcata and lifelong Arcadan walker, dog walker, biker, driver, and also did my college years in Portland. So got a love of biking there and seeing how it fits into cities and all that.
Fantastic.
Yeah, that works with HCOG. I'm ready to introduce myself.
Okay.
Jordan Lemke. I work for SHN, but I'm here as an engineering consultant and assistant city engineer for the city of Blue Lake.
We'll be in Blue Lake tomorrow.
Bob Runkle, Humboldt County Public Works. I'm currently the county surveyor, but I'm also a civil engineer and a traffic engineer. I've been working in the land use division for the better part of 18 years, and also had 5 years in capital projects, putting in bike lanes every time we overlay the road, add sidewalks on existing streets. Also involved with road maintenance for about a 5-year stint as well, and looking at improving signing and overall roadway safety.
John Ford, I'm the Director of Planning and Building for Humboldt County, and I cannot match Bob's.
I'm Brenda House. I am Associate Civil Engineer in Public Works Land Use, so with Bob. I'm fairly new to the county. I relocated here from Washington. I kind of mentioned it a little bit on Saturday where we were doing a lot of these things in a growing city. So, but I am a Humboldt County native and glad to be back home.
Nice.
I'm Jacob Dunn, Associate Planner with the County of Humboldt, working in Long Range, assisting with the McKinley Town Center.
Dave McNamara, I'm also with Humboldt County Planning, long-term local, did some time down in Orange County and Laguna Beach, and I went to UC Irvine. Happy to be back to serve my community.
Fantastic.
Nate Kadri, I'm the city engineer for the city of Arcata. I just want to make sure like everybody is maximizing their time with Dan. When we heard Dan was here, so we organized this meeting. So ask your any planning, design question that you have. This is our time that we will ask the question to Dan. So please feel free to ask questions.
Doug Colbert, Deputy Director of Environmental Services, here. I'm under Emily. And my background has been for about 28 years in water and wastewater. So coming here, I was new to the streets, roads. I left Humboldt County for about 4 years here in the last 4 years and moved to the Joshua Tree area. Did a lot of hiking, walking there, and I had never done a lot until I left, and we were kind of empty nesters. So coming back to Arcata and seeing the vision that you all have here has just kind of gotten me real excited. Since I'm kind of the one that's, you know, in charge of a lot of that, or at least working closely with those that are, this has been very educating for me.
Great.
Kevin Muir, I'm Caltrans Traffic Safety, and I do collision analyses and safety projects and data and innovation as well.
I'm Pam Fleming. I work with GHD, Traffic and Transportation Division, and also some water and river and all that other stuff. Got my hands dirty on the Bay Trail project and worked in that section of it.
And I'm Keenan Hilton. I'm an associate planner with the County of Humboldt, along with this group.
Cool. Did we get everyone? I think we did, except for,
I'm Dobie Klaas. I work for the city.
and my partner in crime, Josh Meyer. You want to say a few words?
Yeah, Josh Meyer. I am Community Design Program Director with CivicWell. We used to be called Local Government Commission for a really long time, so just in case anybody remembers that name. We're a nonprofit. We're based in Sacramento. We work all over the state, and we do walk audits and charrettes and planning for infill policy, leadership development, you name it, in climate and sustainable transportation and housing, and have a long history collaborating with Dan Buden. So, thanks.
Cool.
Maybe Dave Ryan.
Dave Ryan.
So, Dave Ryan, first off, citizen of Arcata who walks and bikes and runs. Secondly, I'm a part-time city employee with the engineering division, and thirdly, I'm on the transportation safety committee.
Nice. Very nice. As part of my background, I now live in a small port town called Port Townsend. It's in Washington. We refer to it as the San Francisco of the North. We're very hilly, and we have an outstanding waterfront and a historic town center, but we're only a population of 10,000. So there's a lot that I can equate and compare and contrast. With that, we got one more person coming in. Yeah. Once you get seated, could we have you introduce yourself?
Sure.
I'm Mandy. I'm the city manager for the city of Buden.
Oh, nice. Thank you. Well, good. And I think what we'd like to do now is have me present kind of an overview. Now, some of what I'm presenting is from what I heard that your residents are most interested in. And I hope to set kind of a vocabulary or stage. And this is in part a lead into tonight's presentation. And so what further comments you can provide me will allow me to fine tune my presentation. Is that okay? Okay.
Some slides, if you want me to move on this side so you can see the screen.
And we want to go here and here. Can everybody see okay? Okay. So, again, I consider it a fantastic privilege to be here working with each of your communities. And I personally want to thank Una for bringing me in. I've been doing this my entire career. I got into building communities through kind of a back door. I never took a single course in college that led me to do what I do, although I did spend 17 years in college. But I truly, I feel like I got into the field when so few people were doing it that I became recognized, and the best mentors in the whole country came to me and said, Dan, this is what you need to know about, you know, whether it was landscape architecture or whatever. So I never learned the bad stuff. I only learned the good things. And come on, is it going to change? There we go. But I also want to thank Josh. He and I have worked together for over 20 years. And of course, Una, who I just have to say this up front, nobody has organized an event as well as Una. So this is fabulous. Mike Wilson is the one who really heard your voices and worked with Josh to have me come and join you. So I'm going to start with a question. How many of you, when you're 10 years old, could walk more than a mile from your home, unaided by an adult? That is phenomenal. That used to be the norm. And it was the norm for a good reason, is parents wanted the kids to go out and experience the world and learn and be out of their hair, right? This is very authentic. Although it's in England, it's the same as anywhere. That if you look down to the great-grandfather George, at age 8, in 1919, he's allowed to walk 6 miles to go fishing. You go up to the grandfather at age 8 in 1950, was able to go 1 mile. You go up to the top, the mother, Vicky, at age 8, was allowed to walk a half a mile to her swimming pool. And now her son, Ed, can walk to the end of his block. So we have to ask ourselves, what did we do that made it virtually impossible for a person to leave their own block until they were like 10 or even 12 years old? And
by watching the news.
well, that would be number one. Yeah. By the way, I think everybody in this room knows that for child abductions, it's actually lower per capita than it was when I was a child growing up. It is the media, right? So I also like to introduce my presentations with this image. You can see the long string of traffic. It takes 20 minutes to go through this intersection. And yet you see that we've got sidewalks, we've got bike lanes, and the reason that it takes this long to get through one intersection is the whole system that supports walking or bicycling doesn't exist in Maui. And so many professionals now recognize that we've got to look at the whole system. We can't just build sidewalks or crosswalks or something like that. I took my original inspiration from Jane Jacobs. She is rated in 3 separate polls now to be the most influential urbanist in the history of the United States, for sure. And some people say in the entire world. Her writings, how many have read her book, The Life and Death of Great American Cities? Very important book, and I'll make this a homework assignment. Go out and make sure your library has plenty of copies. But truly read this very noteworthy book. She identifies things that were going wrong before anybody started to pick up notice, right? So I'm going to skip a few. This is kind of the start for tonight's presentation. So let's skip out. Oh, I can't not show you Key West, can I? So Key West is at the very tip of the Keys, and it has very narrow streets, short blocks, tight corner radii, great plazas, beautiful buildings, and limited parking. That's the formula. And that was not built by college graduates. Truly, Key West was laid out by pirates who typically never went to even school, right? This is their key road into town that is as sad as some of your streets like Broadway, right, or in Eureka. But look at the mistakes they made. The sidewalks not being maintained. What are you going to do when you get off of this bus? Best bet, swim to Cuba. And why have this arrow pointing to the ocean rather than where people want to get to, right? This is a very badly designed road. It's too fast, and it really is unwalkable. You know, if they maintain the waterfront better, then it would be more walkable. But they truly have been making mistake after mistake because they haven't been putting the right emphasis in their town. I loved all the walk-in audits that we took and the bicycle opportunities. Thank you for that, Una. And that helped inform what I'm doing. And for tonight, these are the key topics I'm going to cover, along with a number of other elements that you were each able to point out. And let me now see if I can escape. Where do I go to the group? Right there. No? What's going on, Josh? Trying to get to the, oh, I see, it just wasn't big enough, okay. I'm gonna skip a lot.
You're trying to see all your
Yeah,
slides. Okay.
there we go, okay. I appreciate the fact that you folks are a complete street community, but tonight I want everyone to understand what it is you're trying to accomplish, achieve by working on your streets more. And I love this particular image. It's in Victoria, and the buildings on the left are industrial. The utilities, which have to be somewhere, are also on that side. So notice what they've done. They've attached the sidewalk. But it's the bike lane that saves the sidewalk. It creates a buffer to moving traffic. It allows them to go down to nine foot lanes. I believe if you measure from inside of paint to inside of paint, that's the dimension. And it keeps the speeds low. And by the way, there are 22 benefits of bike lanes. Only 2 are for the bicyclist. right? More turn radius, more sight lines, better maintenance of the road, everything. If we would only consider that as your ultimatum, that everywhere you can get in a bike lane. Now on the other side, notice that we not only have the bike lane, but we have the green. And the sidewalks are set back. And we have beautiful trees. That's the residential side. So I like to say where complete streets is nothing but a policy, it needs to be so flexible that on a given block, you might have two completely different designs, and yet it's the right design. Does this make sense?
Do you see this often where you have industrial on one side and residential on the other?
Not often, but when I do, this is the right way to approach it. Yeah.
And along a corridor, sometimes from block to block, things change, right? So you're trying to have consistency, but at the same time, you might have to adjust a little bit from segment to segment.
Yeah.
And the improvements on that shot, previously I'm assuming they had 2 or 3 lanes, parking on either side. So basically the improvement here was the lighting, the greenscape, the Buden parking, and then eliminating parking on that side of the road?
This had earlier been a 4-lane highway.
Okay.
And they had speeding problems, crash issues, and so on. And they said, we can do better than that. And indeed, throughout Victoria, they're transforming virtually every collector or arterial street. Yep. Thank you. I live in Port Townsend, Washington. This is a neighbor town called Sequim. And I love this illustration because it shows, again, you have to work within your right-of-way. And on the immediate lower end, notice it is an attached sidewalk. And again, it's the bike lane that saves the walking experience. You go further in and they can set the sidewalks back. They can have the green buffers. And they have the median. When we're looking at Broadway, what I was recommending is to transform the way people behave, the speed motorists want to drive. If even though you have multiple lanes on Broadway, this is a much better way to build out, to achieve a lower speed. Yeah? Santa Cruz, California, did a road diet here. They went from 4 to 3, and so they got the 2-way left turn lane. A huge benefit in safety. All road diets will give you a safety enhancement, typically 20, 22%, but many clear up to 70%. And again, you're eliminating many, if not most, of the ways people get into a pickle. Notice the nice planter and a very wide sidewalk and an okay separation from the parking lot. One of our very first streets in the Midwest in Minnesota, this street you see on the left used to be 4 and 5 lanes. And the town ran out of locations to put in their businesses, so they wanted a transformation to the scene on the right. 1 lane in each direction, more parking, and now an opportunity to drop in brand new buildings and really make their downtown the Hardy Center. The cool thing is, the Minnesota DOT didn't want to do this. The project monies were only for resurfacing, and they said, we'll come back in 20 years. And the community said, no, you won't. Keep your money, spend it somewhere else, but don't embarrass yourself by building us a road that isn't right for our community. So one of the ideals of a complete street is anytime you touch a road, you correct for the mistakes or the omissions of the past. And that's what they did here. The town was organized, and they knew that a road diet would work. The road only needed to carry 7,000 cars. And 2 lanes can carry clear up to 30,000 cars if they have a added two-way left turn lane. So they built it after Minnesota realized the town wasn't going to back down. And then Minnesota DOT was so proud that they had dropped their crashes 71%, that they then go to other counties and cities and say, we'd like to do a road diet for your town. So your town obviously can become the model for the whole greater Humboldt County, because you got projects that are ready for resurfacing or rebuilding one way or another. Wanted to cover a few basic principles, which I'll be explaining tonight. We say that people won't walk unless we remove their stress. And we do it for motorists, and they're already in steel cages, so most of their safety comes from just adapting the right speeds and things like that. But the point is, pedestrians are totally exposed, and they have to feel that the speeds are right, that the buffers to the sidewalks are right before they'll walk. So 60% of all Americans say that they would walk more if we built the right environment for them. And the towns that have done it have proven that those are correct statistics. Correct? The same is basically true of bicyclists. Almost the same. What they want is more separation, more green, and lower speeds. And when we can achieve that through the design of our street, then we end up with more people walking, more people biking, and needing less parking, and having better behavior in our downtowns and so on. But I want to go a step further. So we see here a area where people are not walking. What's missing? So we'll put those in. But still people aren't there. Why aren't they there?
You have Photoshop them in.
Oh, I love that. I love that. No, there's a reason why they're not there. There's no place, right? And so we build in that, but still no people there. Why? And this is probably the big one. Security. People want your building code to watch over the parks and or plazas or whatever. And so you need all three. You can't just have your engineers be tasked with bringing back walking. It's got to be built into your land use code. And here, I think you achieve that, or are attempting to achieve it. But you truly need all three, right? You need to have people feel watched over. One of the projects that I fortunately got to guide is this one in Olympia, Washington. The bridge used to look like what you see, and motorists were highly uncomfortable. They certainly wouldn't stay there to look out over the beautiful end of Puget Sound. The image on the right is not Photoshop, it's true. And people now love to come and not only walk across the bridge rather than drive, but they love to just come and meet up with other people and so on. So we've created place. We definitely have created the comfort that people seek. I want to cover a little bit on land use because it's such an important partner. I think everyone in this room is familiar with the idea of a 15-minute city, that you want to live somewhere where most of your needs for the week you can achieve. And I'll show how that looks. Essentially, the older way of doing things, what we call the conventional, if your child wanted to play soccer, then you had to drive them there, and then often came home to get work done, and then go pick them up. That's 4 automobile trips because we didn't put in the street connectivity. But look on the left. That's the same number of homes, the same amount of retail, but look at all the added green. And think how easy it is now for a child to walk to their soccer field or their friend's house or whatever, because of the street connectivity and the fact that we don't force all the traffic out to contaminate the roads and so on. So this is basically where that land use component comes in. If we're going to have the 15-minute city, we got to have the right layout of the next neighborhood and the next neighborhood. Now I got to work with the developer for this project. It's in Portland, and there are many things I absolutely love, but it's one of the lowest amounts of traffic that has to drive anywhere in Portland. It's a new neighborhood. I don't think it's more than 25 years old, but here are the things I like. First and foremost, they do have retail. That's a French department store called Target. Then they have mom and pop stores in the center of their community. They also have their civic buildings, one of the best post offices in America, and other civic buildings. You can see an employment center here, and then this is what's really cool. The school serves 4 neighborhoods, and it's beautifully located. It's got a nice green park right next to it, and here are all the entry points. So by having many ways of getting in and out of the community, there's no heavy traffic anywhere. And but then internally, you can see all of the connections they made for walking and bicycling. So even little links for getting through one portion of town to another can be connected so that it's easier to walk and bicycle than it is to drive a car and then search for that elusive parking space. So they don't need as much parking. And they also have pocket parks. I don't know, do you have pocket parks, small parks, less than an acre in size? Yeah? Okay, good. People will take ownership of a park that's within a 3-minute walk. The park becomes watched over better used, so where you place things really matter. I also want to emphasize that Monterey has really figured this one out. This is one of my favorite developments anywhere in America. It used to be a parking lot. It's only a third of 1 acre. They have no parking requirement. And yet they have a 6-screen movie house, a delicatessen, a restaurant, a coffee house, a shoe store, and a tarot card reading shop. All that, but upstairs, 2 floors, are studio apartments with first right of refusal going to anyone who works in government, so that they can attract a new policeman or fireman or nurse who might not be able to afford standard housing stock, yet wants to live in this beautiful town. So,
Can I ask you, how did they do that?
well, first of all, Monterey knew that they had many parking garages.
Well, no, how did they make a requirement that first right of refusal goes to a government employee on private property? I mean, that's something in the deed, because you could just sell it over and somebody changes their own rules.
Well, they knew that was a value for their community.
Okay.
They wanted their local workers to not have to drive 20 miles or something. So they said, we're going to make that happen. So they, I don't know if they became the developer or what, but the developer didn't mind because he was going to make great money, you know.
Okay.
Every unit would always be
I'm just wondering, the conditions of approval probably when they
Would have
went.
been an agreement, developers agreement.
Yeah, developers
I
agreement.
mean, we're speculating, but yeah.
Yeah, I was just curious.
It's a good question.
Difficult.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, good question. Let me skip all this because you guys get this. But I want, oh yes, sir.
Actually, a question. Would increasing
issues with enforcement and any higher income needs for in that kind of area?
Of like maintaining it and getting the homeowners to honor it and things like that?
Like an opposition?
Yeah, it's got to really be something that's a partnership. When you move into our neighborhood, these public spaces are very important. I'll use my town as an example. Port Townsend, Washington was laid out originally back with the clipper ships. We were to be what eventually became Seattle because clipper ships couldn't get all the way in. And so we laid out for a population of 30,000. Same time San Francisco was being built. Port Townsend was being built. But it turned out, for technical change, we went from clipper ships to steamships. So now they could go in so that the railroad didn't have to come clear out into the peninsula. But what we were left with was all these dedicated rights-of-way that then became trails. My home sits right on a protected trail. So it's a good concept. And you probably have some of those map connectors already. Am I right? Yeah?
In some ways, yes.
Yeah. So anyway, part and parcel with that, and this is where Josh gets to live, a great park and in Davis. And notice the street's not very friendly for walking. The developer comes in on the lot you see across the street and builds this. And I think that's 9 units and plus ground level retail, nice coffee house. And now there's more money for the city to put into maintaining the park. And now there are eyes on the park, right? If I were in charge, I could be king for the day. I would always consider my highest density uses around my open spaces, like a park or a plaza, or as you've beautifully done around the downtown Arcata Park.
Yeah, and I'll add a comment to that. Living in this area is that there are unsheltered, transient folks living there, and having more eyes does allow to find the sweet spot or the balance between being tolerant and giving people different, but at the same time not having areas that are not looked over, that accumulate garbage or other kinds of things, or illicit behavior. I mean, people, it's an issue that comes up everywhere. How do you deal with this? But yes, but I think having less blank areas that are active and watched over really helps out. And it helps out for safety for those who are unsheltered and transient as well. They're not out there completely on their own. There's someone there to benefit them if they get into trouble. So,
good point. One of the things I'm really trying to build here is our transportation engineers cannot solve the problem. We keep shoving more and more traffic their way because we're not focused enough on land use. And everything we do to communicate with our community should be focused on, we've got to do land use right if you don't want to just sit in traffic, right? I think that's all I wanted to cover on this topic. And because John Ford is here, I'm going to show you something I'll show tomorrow in McKinleyville, but I want to preview it with you tonight. And I think it applies many places. Let me hit the right escape button.
Eject button.
Eject. This is going to be fun. We're going to have a blast. Is that it?
Far right. There you go, slideshow.
Okay, this is how communities grow. There's a commercial need, a retail need, a social need. We build out the community, and all we need is a 2-lane road. And then, over time, several new communities emerge. And now we've got more traffic. And so we task our engineers to solve that problem. They do what they're very good at. They widen the road. And then that invites more, more development. And sadly, it comes at an era where we don't understand development. And so all that builds up. So our engineers rescue us again. And they widen the road again. And then that invites more development or growth. And now we've got ourselves into a pickle. We can no longer widen the road. And so traffic, slows down. People get angry. So we basically say, sorry, we've done all we can. We've improved this as much as we can, but there's nothing else we can do. We don't have any land. And quite often that's the case. But here to say that for McKinleyville, we have an option. Now, whether this is the option that will work or not, I would at least allow us to consider that we, first of all, green up these stupid parking lots. And then we can build new, correctly built, traditional. And once we get the buildings to the street, traffic will behave far better. We do that on both sides, but now we still have a problem. Hopefully you can see what we're now doing. For the buildings that were set back, we now put in a new lane, or set of lanes. And we do that on both sides of the street where we can. And now, even though we can't grow the road anymore, we can accommodate the growth in traffic and now serve the greater neighborhood. And now all this is walkable scale, lower speed and so on. Now again, I don't know if this would work for McKinleyville, but it certainly is a tool that in the future we'll probably try to maximize and get the speeds down. And Broadway's a perfect example, right? Right now, you're getting a very high count of fatalities and injuries because of the design of the road is not complementary to the design of the buildings.
And this is a problem we're seeing. I mean, I work all over the state and around the country, and whether you're large urban areas all the way down to small rural areas, you have that strip development, you have that one road, everybody depends on that one road, and the time comes when you need to create a network. So you need to create more roads. You don't not necessarily induce more growth, and it gets complicated because you have a lot of property owners and people that have to all agree on either side of that strip. So it's easier said than done, but I mean, in general, you run out of options once you saturate the roadway. There's just nothing left you can do, and so you've got to have to start thinking about long term.
I want to show this land use. This is Marina, California, and this is pretty much how it was being built out. Although it was suburban, these are proposed buildings now honor the street, and the transit authority bought up all the land they needed for their transit hub, but they truly had bought the last good piece for their downtown to be. Marina did not have a downtown. And so this is what they wanted to do, is put all their buses, parking for their employees, blah, blah, blah. And the only real good buildings that would be built to Reservation Road. What the Civic Well, formerly called Local Government Commission, did is brought in a team, pointed out the folly of that approach of using all this land that would destroy the opportunity for a downtown. And instead, to handle their buses in a way that made sense, to use the road itself for the bays, and then to create a plaza and have far more mixed use. Exactly where people would love to live, right? Hop on a bus, go anywhere in Monterey County. And They would then be able to have farmers markets and either this density of building or a different density, whatever penciled out for development. But look where the buses are now. They're in the street that already exists. And so you could have this density scenario or this density scenario, whatever the developer can make happen. But I want to show that what we need is for every organization, every agency to be working in concert with building truly livable communities. That we can no longer say, well, we bought the land, it's ours, we're going to do it this way, and that's it. And indeed, that was fought by the transit agency, but in the end, they ended up, sadly, the transit director died of a heart attack. And over time, they were able to build most of what I'm showing you here. And it's a really good model of when you do a transit hub, you want to build for the community, not rip it further apart and force more cars and make it harder for your bus drivers to service the community. I think that's enough content, isn't it? Yeah, so with that, every change we make in a community should be to honor what we value. And that's one reason I love coming to Arcata and Humboldt County, is that you guys are doing things beyond what you probably are aware of when you compare yourself with the rest of the country. You really are. And you're probably doing it because this is a very precious place, right? I mean, you live here for a reason. This is a hard place to get to. In fact, I think you should call yourself the Hidden Coast. You do, okay. Thoughts, comments, questions that would help me refine my presentation for tonight. And tonight there'll be a lot more content. Yes, sir.
Well, one of the one of the slides that Dobie was commenting on, where you had the rural beautiful, the road that was transformed, and you had the landscape areas that were where the parking used to be and all that. I mean, it seems like the big problem is always the parking spot. It's like no one wants to give up a single on-street parking spot, and it always seems to be the issue when it comes to trying to put in all these great facilities and the landscaping. Is that the parking is so valued, and then the same goes for the putting in the median. Everybody wants, at least I work for Caltrans, and there's this big push, or not big push, but there's this thought that, well, if we put medians in, now we can't move traffic over on there if we're doing construction, or now emergency vehicles can't run down the middle and to get to where they're going, and so we can't put medians in. So it seems like, we really need to address the removal of on-street parking. It's always a huge political,
right.
And even just the placement of medians. I mean, there was an idea up in McKinleyville to put medians in on Central Avenue in McKinleyville, and that had so much opposition from the business owners that the county was forced to scale that back to what they have now, the real small.
Yeah. Well, this country goes crazy over parking. And so when we were on our earlier walk with your technical staff this morning, I introduced the concept of back-in angled parking. And tonight I'm going to show an image in Sarasota, Florida, where they're doing back-in angle parking. They don't need a bike lane because diagonal parking alone will bring the speed way down. But the travel lane is only 8 feet wide. And it's wide enough for people to back in. And so they maxed out the use of the paved area. So they got the back-in angle parking, which is a very vital resource, certainly for a downtown and other areas we're trying to reinvent. And it's a really good city to study. Just go to Google Earth and look down on certainly the greater downtown area, and you're going to see they are reducing their paved streets to minimum, and which we need to do, right, for 10 or 20 environmental reasons alone. But we also have to get away from, you're entitled to a parking space right in front of everywhere you go, right? And we're working on a project right now in Edgewater, Colorado, Denver, where both sides of the street have on-street parking, and yet hardly anyone is parking because they really don't need it. You know, the properties all have off-street parking, they have side streets frequently, and the street should be for multimodal transportation. So it's a tough issue when you deal with one property owner, but the street belongs to the whole community, right? So our quest should be multimodal transportation everywhere, private or free parking for you is not going to be as frequently offered because you're destroying your city, your traffic flow, your chance for people to walk and to bike and to use transit successfully, right?
Yeah, and I would add to that there just needs to be more education and effective communication tools. So sometimes, well, many people aren't aware of how much parking they actually have. And it's just a question of how it's organized, and it's not easily understood where things are at. And it's, you know, you have two audiences. You have your residents, and then you have your property owners. And both of them have different reasons why they would be thinking about parking differently. And so it does help a little bit to kind of have someone who can communicate well and say, look how much parking you actually have, show you an aerial and go, look where it all is. You know, we checked how much it was being used. It's 30%, 40% or whatever. You've got a lot of extra parking, so let's think about how we could reorganize it and make it more effective. So, yeah.
A couple things. One, in driving throughout the state of California, you can see where a lot of cities try to push for getting the buildings up against the right of way.
Mm-hmm.
But it seems like the plan is half-baked, and if they get the building there, but all the entrances.
I know.
Aren't your parking lot because people don't want to walk around to the front, so you're not quite really getting
Right.
what you wanted to get. You're getting a half-baked plan.
Right. And again, that's a refining of our code. You know, you want a new CVS. They want the parking to the rear and they want the entrance to the rear. You say that's a deal breaker. We want people to come by transit. We want them to walk. We don't want them to have to go back through a parking lot in order to enter your store. Most towns are rewriting the code to correct for that mistake.
Eureka has a design standard that you have to have a prominent entrance facing the street.
Yeah.
So a lot of it seems that the goal is trying to get the lot that's as narrow as possible to have more opportunities for front entrances along the road.
Correct.
That was another component that.
Yeah. If you think through what Walt Disney did when he built Disneyland and then later Disney World, you go into those shops through the door and you realize it's the size of a big suburban building. That's what they need, but by code, or at least Disney's way of making the Main Street feel authentic, they have a new entry every 25 feet. And again, we respond to that. That's what the human heart says, is we want plenty of windows, plenty of observation, but we want those frequent entries into the building. And Walt Disney hired one of the best architects in the world when he laid out Main Street. And just to stroll up and down his Main Street, you begin to realize these are critical pieces that he's figured out.
But kind of elaborating from the building part, now getting into the sidewalk aspect of it, when you're having, we'll call it the commercial sidewalk area, what are you seeing as the recommended minimum width for such a sidewalk?
Right. It's going to depend on the size or scale of the downtown, but in general, you want from curb face to the building front enough to accommodate your planter row. So let's say that's 4 feet. If you really minimize, you can do nice plantings and 4 feet of depth. You get your lamps in, your kiosk in, anything you need in that 4 foot of space. So that's non-walkable. Going next to the building, you have what we call the shy zone. And that's another place no one's going to walk. They're not even going to stop and linger there. So that leaves you how much space you got left for the actual walk and talk zone is what I call it. You can get by on 5 feet. You're much more comfortable with 7 feet if you've got that much real estate. And I will show that with the diagram tonight. And I'm so sorry I can't show you the whole presentation now, but I can't.
So that shy zone area, how,
2 feet.
so it sounds like
2 plus, let's say 5, that's 7, plus 4, that's 11.
11, 12 foot.
11 or 12, yeah. And that works for most sidewalks. There are some sidewalks like Chicago where sidewalks can be clear up to 30 feet. And they're the right dimension at 30 feet.
And that's just due to the overall density that you're getting.
Yeah, Michigan Avenue in Chicago, one of the best shopping streets in the world. Rodeo Drive in California, I want to say their sidewalks up to 20 feet. That's very, very well used.
And then kind of translating that over to a residential area.
Absolutely minimum 5 feet. But if it's at the curb, it's got to be 6 feet. Obviously, though, if you have a planter row, and again, you can grow good trees in 4 feet. You want 4 plus 5, that's 9 feet for a residential area. But nothing less than 5 foot for the paved walking space.
So one thing that always kind of got to me with the 5 foot sidewalks is that it's almost difficult for 2 people to walk side by side.
Yes.
It almost seems like you really need to have a 6 foot.
Maybe I should show those images now because it's a really good rule of how to lay things out and it works. I'll show you each of the dimensions.
Family neighborhood, 5 feet can probably work if you have a planter strip between the sidewalk and the curb. But you're right. I mean, if it's just more these are absolute minimums.
Yeah.
So if you can build a 6 foot sidewalk, why not? And then 2 people can walk side by side and pass each other.
You're dodging utility poles and street
Yeah.
posts and stuff. And,
Well, you'd want those to be out of the way of completely out of the 5 foot sidewalk area. So they might go into that plant, furniture, utility zone. All 3 of those things can occur in that zone. And 4 foot's a minimum for that. I mean, really 6 feet's pretty nice. We're being realistic, you don't always have that kind of space. But if you have a 5 foot sidewalk, I would say 12 feet would be the ideal if we could all do whatever we want in a residential neighborhood from the property line to the curb. Now you have a little bit more room if you want to grow if for some reason you want to grow bigger trees, you don't want to have the trees interfere with the sidewalks, things like that. But you can do it smaller, and we have to be realistic. And in very urban, dense areas, we may not have as much space to work with, and you just have to be more creative.
Yeah. So this captures what the pedestrian space requirements are, and it's the outer bubble that we have to consider that people wobble. Some because they had too much to drink, but others just because that's the way you balance, right? So a pedestrian space, we recommend that 6 feet works when you have higher volumes and so on. You do the same kind of measuring for your crossings. And again, a standard way for people to share their walking experience is side by side. Same thing we do in a car, right? And not behind the driver, but next to the driver. And so your crossing should be a minimum of 12 feet. Even though the manual and uniform traffic control devices permit you to get away with 6, it's just not right. And so we recommend minimums for everything. And now let's talk about the comfort. You've got probably a road dieted street, But because they don't have bike lanes, the pedestrians are really exposed. Where the sidewalk is probably 5 or maybe even 6 feet, you need that buffer. And so note the image on the right, once you add in the bike lane, and in this case they've added a brick buffer as well. That's pretty good, even though you still have your sidewalk attached. Pedestrians are always leaving us messages. Why did you put the sidewalk right next to the curb if you owned the right-of-way where we could be more comfortable, correct? So, what is your requirement for sidewalks in your community by your current code?
We have minimum like 6 feet, 5.5 walkway and 6 inch of curb. In downtown area, minimum is 8 feet.
Okay, that's decent. What about your driveway depth? And look what's going on here.
Not enough.
Does your code require enough depth for the modern cars to be not blocking the sidewalk? Okay. Tesla's. Okay. But also look at the rolled curbing. Sometimes a good idea, but in this case not, because the motors are rolling up onto the curb. So that is an important detail. This is what my minimum recommendations would look like. This fits beautifully inside a 40-foot right-of-way. And again, many people would like an edge, a real edge to their property, so they are required by code to have a foot setback from the sidewalk. And that way, the full width of the sidewalk works, correct? And then, in this case, again, minimum width, a 5-foot sidewalk, and then the planter furniture zone could be as little as 4 feet, but in this case, I believe it's 6. And that is a very inviting walk. Yes, John?
Is there a parking lot on that street?
Yes, that's a two-way street, parking on both sides.
What's the curb to curb?
I think it's 24 feet, curb face to curb face, and again, parking on both sides. And I believe Baldwin Park, that's in Orlando, I believe that would be a yield street. So when people come home at night, if a motorist wants to pass a motorist going the other way, one of them has to pull in and let the other one by. Safest street we know to build. Yes?
With street widths like that, with parking on both sides, we can get pushback mostly from emergency services.
If you're not communicating well enough with your emergency responders, but hopefully you're getting the concept across. We want safe neighborhoods, and you being able to go 30 miles an hour for the last 3 blocks, you don't need that. Because later people would come in and ask for traffic calming, and you may not want humps and whole strings of 4-way stops and so on. So Josh and I have put together training courses where we bring the emergency responders and the planners together to work out and coordinate what they truly need versus what they theoretically would need.
Yeah, there's ways to work through it when you have narrower streets. You can have more points of entry, points of access, so it can come from more than one direction. If you have a really, really long block, like in a suburban neighborhood, 1,000-foot block, they're going to want it to be bigger, right? But if it's smaller, then they have other ways that they can drive their trucks. The trucks don't have to pass each other. They can come from 2 directions.
Yeah. So in the same neighborhood, I'm sorry, yeah.
Go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say in the same neighborhood, here you've got more mixed-use housing, higher densities, more people walking, and a need to keep the building close. So in this case, the 4-foot maximum height fence becomes a very important quality to protecting the walking experience. Same concept when you get to a big drop-off, that you have to have a fence here for safety as well as comfort. And but notice again the details. And here we were able to keep a pointer so that we could still have the setback on the sidewalk. And let's see if we have any other dimensions we want to cover. No, I think that's all I have in this string. So, great questions, guys.
I'd like to segue to bike lane.
I know. And by the way,
I'd like to segue to lunch, it looks like.
yeah. Ooh, great lunch. One of the things I really like about this, not only just the statistic that our life, the quality of our health, and how long we live, and how happy we are, we're in control of. There is about 20% that our genes dictate, but we're in charge of the other 80%. So if we build truly a remarkable, livable neighborhoods, then we're extending the quality of life, the reduction in healthcare costs, and how long people get to live. So this is Jackson, Wyoming. A really nice trail along the water. A real true edge. It's really important. But look at how they built the housing to watch over the trail. So high security, wonderful, probably an ideal place to live, where you can immediately watch others. You know, just pull up a chair and wave to your neighbors as they go by. Yeah. Do I have more time or not?
Yeah, you have time, definitely. You have.
Okay. Other questions? Yes. Yes, sir. In the back, all the way in the back. Yeah.
I guess I have two questions. First is, what type of messaging about parking concerns have you found to be most effective? And second, with a community like McKinleyville that has a lot of, I mean, just purely single-family residential subdivisions that aren't, you know, I mean, you could walk from them to Central, but it's cul-de-sacs, it's maybe even a couple miles away. We were talking about building complete transportation networks. What's your approach there? Do you focus on getting the complete safe network for cyclists and pedestrians all the way out to every subdivision, or do you focus on building up the communities right around Central? I don't know, what would your approach be?
My general philosophy is start with the center, the heart of your community. Get that much, much better as you go along. You guys have been doing that. And then go out a ring and see how much more you can capture there and make that very walkable into the center. And then go out another ring, and the tools will change somewhat as you go further and further out. But the principles of what you're trying to accomplish, which is the connectivity, really work in composite with what you're trying to do for your town center. Yeah. And you had a question then.
And then the other one about messaging about parking.
About marking?
Parking.
How
do you speak when people are very concerned?
Well, when people have a concern for parking, first of all, let me defend the need for parking. One single parking space is worth $200,000 per year. That is people going into the shops and buying things and so on. But if the space is being abused, even by the retail shop owner, then that's just not playing with a full deck, right? So I always say to a community, have you done a recent parking management study? And in almost every community I work with, they have not, and they're abusing their parking. Even my own town, Port Townsend, we have very limited parking downtown, and we really don't have a place to put parking lot for staff or something like that. But we have plenty of streets that lead into the downtown, all of which have parking. If people would take a 5-minute walk, we don't have a parking problem. So always start with a parking management study. Find out what you're doing right, keep doing that, and the things you aren't doing right, and let's just say the amount of time you're allotting where an employee could be parking there for 4 hours or 8 hours, that needs to be adjusted, right?
Can I just throw 2 quick, count the spaces, count the utilization first.
Yes.
And get that info, and you'll probably
Count what?
count the amount of spaces, the available spaces, and the utilization. Study how they're utilized, certain times of the day, the total amount. And you often find in an area, it feels like there's no parking, but you actually find out, well, actually, not very far, we see a lot of underutilized spaces, or there's only a time of day when it's really busy.
Yeah.
And so maybe the solutions could be a little different. But once you have that information, you're in a much better position. Almost everywhere we go, almost everywhere, not always, but almost everywhere we go, we find out that people don't realize that 12, 16 hours of the day, the lots are empty.
Yeah.
And
And we need to share parking, right? So for example, a church, they need parking on Sunday. They need parking on Wednesday night or whenever their other events occur. They don't need it at any other time. So all parking should be, anyone can park there. Maybe you charge a fee, great. But the point is, when you go to the air and you study the parking usage, you find that sometimes a third of all your parking is just not being used in the peak of the day, right?
So a plan to accommodate the surge or the peak or shared parking, that's the third piece.
Yep.
So along with that, with the parking issue, one thing I did notice, you brought up Disney, which I thought, when I went there recently, I saw something that was really innovative, and I saw a couple other parking garages adopt this technology where basically you have a light and a system that basically tells you how many spaces are available, and you can actually see it from the top and know where those spaces are available. So have you seen those kind of smart systems being integrated in, being able to, invest in those smart capabilities without investing in large infrastructure right away?
Yes, and a good example is in Columbus, Ohio. Their favorite, it's a mall, but it's not a mall. It's really a traditional layout of buildings, housing, everything. They have those counters. And it minimizes people driving around and around and around, or even trying to go in and find there is not a parking space. It works really well. It's a simple technology.
It's really cheap too.
Exactly, and I think I'm understanding correctly that San Francisco does that with the surface streets.
Yeah, and Davis, so there are tech fixes coming. I mean, they're not all the way in, but we're really close to where people could maybe have an app. They go in and it goes, oh, this is where I'm going to park. They don't have to think about it. They go there, boom, it's not very far from where they need to go. And it exactly, and it keeps and all that data comes in instantly. It tells you where places are full, where places are empty. Davis is starting to use that technology, starting to kind of put it in, so you can have signage. You're driving, a sign maybe when you come into town says full, full, full. Go over there. Airports are starting to use that. So we could tech our way out of this one.
Yes.
And then my next question was, so a lot of this watch over the trails kind of a thing, it seems like you're having to infill around the trails to provide that watch over.
Right.
And so it seems like this trail component is more artificially created and not sensitive habitat, because if you have sensitive habitat with a trail, it's a little harder to infill around that trail kind of a thing. So it seems as though, like I said, you're creating that artificial kind of green space that's not as protected.
I think the important thing is you certainly have all of your environmental rules that really need, but you also have strong housing needs, and it just makes all the sense in the world when you can, when the land allows for it, to build as much housing as you can near your trails, providing the security, providing the added asset to anyone who gets to live there, to now probably not even need to own a car.
But I hear what you're saying. Yeah, there's trails go through different contexts. There's some places where a trail needs to be very light. It's not paved. And that's most of the trails in the in the world that go off into open space. And but then as you get into more urban areas, you start looking at low impact development, green infrastructure techniques, so that the trail is a little less disruptive, and it has greening. But obviously, when you get into a very, very urban area, you start getting to pavement.
I think it's more of a land use issue of planning a trail where it's not a corridor that's walled off with 6-foot wall fences and a 20-foot wide corridor like we have
accessible and open.
In McKinleyville and Midtown Trail.
Yep.
Visibility.
Yep.
And obviously, if we have environmentally sensitive areas, you're going to be more than a 20-foot wide corridor to start with in those areas. So you are going to create an enjoyable experience.
Correct.
Regardless of
Yes.
where the trail goes.
Do you want to maybe touch on maybe a well-designed two-way street versus one-way street?
Yeah. The two-way streets are really the best way to build streets. They provide much greater access. They control speeds better than one-ways. And I think everyone here is aware that back in the 50s, maybe even the early 60s, the Federal Highway Administration, worried about traffic, wanted to flush all the traffic, get people home within 15 minutes, right? That's how and why they funded one-way streets. And it was also at a time when we were losing our interest in downtowns, failed to understand the value of downtowns, and so it further created the ripples that destroyed lots of downtowns. What many towns are now doing is going back to two-way streets. They're reducing their crime, they're reducing the speed, and they're reducing their collisions. I do a whole presentation just on one-way to two-way street conversions. There are times when you want one-way streets, when you want to max out your parking, or you want added space for a bicycling facility or some other benefit that you are going to accrue. But overall, as a general rule, we perform better with two-way streets. Yeah? Did that answer the question?
I think if I could jump to that, part of that though, what I think we all hear you saying, or maybe I'm interpreting into this, is the one-way streets were designed purely for speed and efficiency.
That is correct.
Whereas two-way streets now are designed more to bring things back to scale.
Yes.
Which slows traffic down.
Yes.
Enhances the pedestrian experience of being on the street.
Yes.
Recreates the sense of place. So what are we designing a two-way street to do? I mean, like the one that you showed with the 24-foot curb, the curb, that's going to slow people down to between 15 to 20 miles an hour going through there when you see oncoming cars.
That's correct. And if I could be king for the day, I would not allow any local streets to be more than 24, maybe 26 feet wide, parking on both sides. We call those a yield street, and they are the safest streets we can build. And they take up less pavement, they're lower cost, and give us permission to put in sidewalks and other treatments that work. Yeah. How are we doing on time?
We are doing good. We got lunch ready, so we should start eating and discussing, and we can do the same.
Oh, good. And there are a couple things, because this audience is so important, I would like to show you, but everybody go and grab some food.
So was that in a residential neighborhood, 24 feet? Okay, so residential, okay, I just want to make sure it was kind of a...
Local street.
Local street, okay.
Good, okay.